All right, we are here with none other than the EU League and the APAC League's newest caster, Fluke. Thank you for joining us so much.
100%. Yes.
Now, let's start with your entry, actually, which is a story that I don't really know all that well. Your entry to Rainbow Six, because I remember you popping up in the scene a couple years back. How did you get your start in Rainbow Six?
I convinced a group of friends to put a lobby up together. I had never done any esports stuff before. I was a YouTuber and a Twitch streamer, and I kind of just tried to do things that seemed fun and interesting, and I thought the concept of me shouting over my friends who sucked was going to be entertaining, and it was. So I kind of just kept on doing it. A couple of streams, I started to put together like fake team names and stats for them, and then from that I got onto the ESL community caster thing, and then from there I just kept on doing it, and that was like 3.5, 4 years ago, maybe now. It was a while ago, and it was just something where it went from a fun idea with friends of like, I've always wanted to try this. I love a lot of sports. I follow football or soccer and other stuff, and shouting just seemed fun. And here I am, 3 and a bit years later, still doing it, apparently, much to the ire of my neighbors.
Well, you don't like your neighbors anyway.
I mean, they have it coming. They
have it coming.
You know.
You have been climbing those ranks, as I said, very, very quickly. Yeah. So you got your start using the ESL Cups, and then you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were with Demo for quite a fair bit of time as a casting partner / comrade.
Yeah. It was, the partnership with Demo was a fun one. Because I actually, the first person I ever started working on, the first person who noticed me is the same person who first noticed Stokes, as far as I know, was Sternab. And Sternab got me to do a couple of things with him and did CCS. I'm one of those CCS alumni alongside yourself, alongside Stokes and Flynn and Ace as well, and Exotroga. And then from then on, I did a couple of UK broadcasts, and then they said, hey, there's Demo, who had obviously done big things before I'd seen Demo on like Paris and whatnot. With a mispainted face and ill-fitting clothes because his suitcase went missing and he had to borrow.
Hilarious story, by the way.
Had to borrow Cassandra, and he still
absolutely hilarious story.
Mm-hmm. And he had to he now double checks every time he flies out. He double checks his luggage. Like he will, if he's on like a transfer, he'll rebook it out and rebook it back in to make sure he's still got it. And like, either way, yes, Demo, who is this bundle of volume and kind of knowledge of the game as well. Like, it maybe the first person I've ever cast with where I was completely blown away by what he knows, and he just really kind of took my work up, I think. Like, and his energy came onto me, and I slowed him down apparently, which was a good thing for him, he was saying. And he just like opened those doors of, okay, now I think I'm learning this properly. Like,
you have most recently been sucked in to EUL/APAC. Now, when the conversations began to fill out talent a number of months ago, were you involved in those initial conversations, or was it something where Faceit or Ubisoft never reached out to you at the time?
No. I think it's a fun world, and I guess I've always been quite upbeat about this stuff because I love doing it, but I've been a kind of underground face for a long time. It was something that came up recently where they're like, oh, you know, how do you really know the faces that are coming up? And obviously casters always know other casters that are working. We talk a lot, and there'll always be feedback and stuff like that. But it was just before all this kind of kicked in, and I was doing OGA, and Ubisoft were checking off casters and verifying who they were. They got to they were like, Demo, yeah, we've had him at Paris Major, you know, blah, 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 Dez, on DreamHack, whatever, Ace, we've seen. They go, Fluke, and they go, we have no idea who that is. And then I was like, okay, cool. But I was like, I felt I did a really good job at OGA, so I was kind of in a good place. Then we did another season of UK, and then I got asked to do the Faceit community Clash thing, which was great. It was the first Faceit Siege broadcast. It was a fun charity thing. It was me, Hap, Dez, and Ace over a couple of weekends.
Those were the throwback matches by any chance?
Yeah. So the EU throwback matches, it was like a little offside bracket as well. It was a load of fun to do. And then we also included the announcement for the new EU season. So about 40 minutes before the broadcast, they say, Oh, also, and they go to me and Hap, who at this point had been in conversations, and I had no idea that a lot of my friends and now colleagues were already in discussions about this stuff. Obviously, NDAs, privacy, they all kept their lip. That's their job. But then 40 minutes before the broadcast, they go to us, they go, okay, also you can talk about starting in Paris and all of the new talent and all of the new stage and getting CL there and all of this stuff. And I just kind of went, yeah, I'm not in that. That's not me. And then they were like, really? And they're like, yeah, it's. And then I was like, I don't know who it is. I didn't know they'd decided. And Hap was like, yeah, they've decided. I was like, okay, cool. So that was like 30 minutes. And then we went on to the broadcast and I had to be like, yeah, so all of this stuff's happened. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. Tune in. Also, while they were like, yeah, we're really sorry. We didn't know you weren't part of it. I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's, it worked out in the end. I'm there now. I made it. I can't complain.
How did this come about? Because you took part in the LAN Finals that were done out of the Paris studio. You were paired up with none other than another lovely lady that we had on this show, Gio. How did it come about that you got brought out to work those LAN Finals? And then, more importantly, how did the conversation shift to bringing you in full time?
Well, I think I'm very lucky that a lot of, as I said before, casters talk, and I think we all kind of see each other's work, and the team that's there liked my work. I'd worked with a few of them across other leagues and stuff like that. So when the discussion came for that team and the discussions with Ubisoft and Faceit to be like, look, we're looking at expanding the pool, or last minute, even before all of the before the major stuff, they were like, oh, well, Fluke's always up there. And obviously Ace is always up there as well. They pay a lot of attention to what gets posted on Twitter and socials and Reddit and stuff like that. So seeing all the feedback and seeing the names that came up, they were like, we were on a list pretty much. But a
good list.
Thanks to a good list. I hope it was a good list. And then about 5 days or 6 days before the original travel day for the mini majors, when obviously COVID and the current pandemic had turned it into these closed events, like they weren't in Paris, and I got an email and it was like, hey, so we kind of need somebody for next week. Are you free? And I was like, I can try my best. And it ended up working out, and it was like a last minute thing. So I was there to kind of help, obviously, fill for the talent that otherwise couldn't be there, like Jess and Dev and Alex, and it went well. It was such a quick turnaround that's the reason I'm not in any of the media day stuff, is they kind of just needed somebody to like jump in. My name had been already kind of bounced around by the other talent as well. And they went, okay, cool, let's take a risk. And the Ubisoft team, yet again, at that situation at the end of it, and after the show had been good, because if they'd said at the beginning, then it may be of worry. But after the show had been good, they said, we're really glad that you were able to perform because we didn't know who you were. And you were on this Faceit list. And I was like, well, at least you opened it with you. Glad I did a good job.
Well, I can tell you right now that I would fashion myself as a pretty hard critic to please. But I have been exceptionally impressed with what you've brought to the broadcast, and I think you are going to make an already good EUL and APAC North show even better. And I've obviously got to tune into you and Hap's casting over the last week or so, because I couldn't watch every single EU show because obviously at the time
there's a lot.
Yes, there's a lot of content, of content, like our show here, Retake as well. But professional accomplishments aside, it has also been a pretty big year for you personally, and something that you recently tweeted about a couple of times was the transition that you are undergoing. So if you'd like, I don't want to handle it poorly or use any clumsy language, so I'll let you have the floor to address it yourself, because I think, and I've tweeted and I've shared my thoughts about it, and I think that it takes a ton of courage, and obviously I think it's great that you have been as outspoken about it as you have been.
Yeah, it's been a year. It's been, because for me, something that you'll find out if you're ever in the LGBTQ or you're ever whatever is you never really stop coming out. Like you always come out. So my parents have known about me and my friends have known for a fair few years at this point. It's not a quick process in the UK. So I've been on the waiting list for even just conversations with therapists and the first steps into whatever might lead into my future for 3.5 years. So it's not a quick process. It's one where they want to always make sure all the balances and checks there. And when I got into casting, I had already started this process. And I realized that casting was going to become a thing where the two were going to intersect. And I think for me as well, what I quickly realized was I'd always tweeted about it and I hadn't really mentioned it because in a way I'd already mentioned it. And I didn't want to like stir the pot. I'm quite an introverted person, as weird as that is to say, for this is my job. But it realized that there was a lot of kind of kids and a lot of people that were coming up in the scene that didn't really have any representation. And it was pointed out to me by the familiar face in the siege scene, Chowderhead, who knew about me that I may have been the first openly trans caster ever for like any tier 1 level. Obviously, openly is a heavy word, and I know that there's other trans casters out there, and I know that they're working in different facilities, but to be on like the tier 1 scene, I don't think it's ever happened before.
So you felt there was almost a responsibility for you to take on that role?
Yeah, it's like it's a conversation that I've had with other people in the scene as well, who aren't cis or straight or whatever, is that you kind of fall into this responsibility role and you fall into this situation where whether you want to or not, it is a conversation, and it's always going to be a conversation because it's not the norm. And having these conversations and being this person is what is going to start to turn it into the norm. The most common response that I ever got from people first of all, I actually want to just segue this. The support from the community was amazing. It was unbelievable, all the way from the kind of heads of the studio and the esports division to obviously my colleagues, who some of them already knew before I publicly came out, friends, obviously, and just the people in the community as well. Unbelievable, like week on social media. And but outside of that, there's always going to be negative. And the negative was always stuff like, why do they have to talk about it? And it shouldn't matter. It should just be based on their talent, which I agree with. I don't think it should matter, but until it's normalized and until it's not crazy and not out there for someone to say something like this and be like, I'm gay or I'm trans or I'm bi or whatever, then the conversation is going to be there. And as I said it on the subreddit, I posted something, and on Twitter, the main thing that you can take away is if you truly believe that it should just be based on talent and shouldn't be a conversation, tell that to the accounts that are set up to tell me that I shouldn't be there because I'm trans, or tell that because that will speed things up, not to the kid that just wants to have somebody to look up to because there's no one else for them.
Do you ever think that's unfair of you to have to shoulder that weight? Because you've already got a situation where you have to go through something that you're navigating relatively on your own for the first time. And now you also have this responsibility basically thrust upon you that you need to do it publicly. I mean, I understand completely where you're coming from, and I think it's extremely courageous and really honorable. But do you ever think that it's a bit unfair that you have to open yourself up to that level of scrutiny, to the trolls and I saw a couple accounts that were, as you said, set up to tell you pretty terrible things? Yeah.
I think it's a weird situation, and I don't think that people in this kind of responsibility, you never really ask for it, or you shouldn't try and ask for this kind of role, but you have to learn to adapt to this stuff, and you have to try and learn to be someone who can kind of be there for yourself. And I wouldn't be able to be where I am, and I wouldn't be able to be in the position I'm in without the many kind of figureheads that have come before. You have to look that Stonewall was 50 years ago. If that, all of the development of modern civil liberties weren't much further beyond, it's only been about a century since women had the vote. It's a quick turnaround and a quick time frame, and I am obviously in no way kind of conflating myself with any of those massive figureheads who took those bigger leaps. Mine is definitely a much less significant role, but you know, it's those massive steps they took. For me, looking at it from my perspective, as mine is a smaller role, all I'm doing is just being myself in an esports scenario. There's trans people across the board and across the world and so many other facilities and functions, and I'm always going to get hate from it, but so is the trans kid that just plays Siege and that's just on Twitter. And, you know, if their account gets seen, the same person who throws the hate at me will throw the hate at them. At least I can kind of tell them to do one, because I'm in a situation where I'm kind of proving them wrong, I think. And in doing that, you know, it's a weird situation, but if I can do that against those people, for like the people that need it, I'm always going to do that.
I cannot express the amount of respect that I had for you at the start. It has only grown since I have gotten to know you, and I have said the exact phrase, "We are very lucky to have you," many times, and I mean that in every sense of the words, not just in Rainbow Six, but also here on our interview, because I do think, and I have always maintained, that we have a responsibility to use our platforms correctly, and I would be hard-pressed to argue that you are not using it correctly. I think you are doing a great job with it. So I really appreciate you taking the time to step onto our show here, and I think that you've done a wonderful job as a caster over the years. I am extremely excited to see how you continue to grow in EUL and APAC, and I think that all the success that you've had so far is very well deserved. Thank you very much for taking your time with this interview here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm going to treasure these moments, because as I do transition more into a feminine role, my makeup is going to take at least 2 hours rather than the 10 minutes of just showing up.
Oh my, what a way to end on. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated.